Well, welcome to another Wine Time Yakima. We're back here in the Yakima Visitor Centre. We want to say a huge thank you to Adam and all of his team for welcoming us back. All the Christmas decorations are gone though. Kind of sad, but it's January, isn't it? And we're very happy to welcome Alicia Stromme Tobin from Safe Yakima as our guest this week. Alicia, it's so nice to see you. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing well. It's a little chilly. It's a little chillier than I like, but you know, that's just part of living in 4 seasons in the Pacific Northwest.
But we haven't had winter this year.
I know.
Maybe it's coming.
I know.
I don't know.
I hope so. Well, at least for the mountains. I don't want to shovel the snow.
Now, being with Safe Yakima, of course, you don't drink. Or if you do drink,
I
not when you're working.
Drink, but I am over 21, yes, but not in the workday.
No,
you are
so
correct.
We're having a really lovely mint tea actually this week, which it smells delicious. Oh, and it is very nice. Oh, but gosh, it's very hot.
Well,
cheers. It's really nice to see you. How are you? Now, Alicia, we've met many, many times to talk about your work, and we are going to talk about your work today. But I want to go back to not necessarily the beginning, but what brought you to Yakima? Are you a Yakima native, in fact?
I am not a Yakima native. I actually was born in California.
Oh, right. Yeah, now you have a Californian accent.
Do I?
Wasn't sure.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Youngest of 5 children. My dad was a blue-collar worker. He was a millwright. And he moved from Nabisco in California and got a new job at Alcoa. And it brought us to the Leavenworth area. And then I ended up doing high school at Eastmont in East Wenatchee. Went to college, had scholarships, academic scholarships to go to Gonzaga. I went there 2 years. And at the end of 2 years, back then they didn't give you 4 years worth of scholarships. They just thought you'd love the GU experience so much you'd scrounge up $40,000 and keep going. So I then threw in college applications elsewhere and ended up at Washington State University.
So you've been in the state quite a while.
Yes,
yeah,
since 78.
childhood.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And then what brought me to Yakima is my ex-husband actually worked in the mint industry. And so he was a UPS driver in the Pullman area when we lived in Pullman. And he got a job in sales in the mint industry, and that brought us here. And at the time, I was in banking, and so it was easy for me to just transfer with Washington Mutual.
Now, I looked at that in your bio because although you've really dedicated your life to volunteerism and you've worked in many different organizations, you did start in banking and finance and had a very successful career there, I think.
Yes, I did. Thank you for noticing. Volunteerism doesn't pay the bills, I found. So despite my bleeding heart, I had to pay the bills and my student loans. And so, yes, I started out, I was a business major with an emphasis in marketing. I minored in business law and in Spanish, and started out my career in banking, worked my way up through all the formidable positions: teller, new accounts, ops supervisor, assistant manager, loan officer, manager. I was a junior regional manager, was director of lending at the credit union. I underwrote loans. When I was at Washington Mutual, I was in the top 2%, we called it Premier Group, so you had to be the top 2% performer across the United States, and so our branch at 56th and Summit View had achieved that status. And then at Bank America, I was at Bank America for a short period of time and was in the top 1% on the West Coast out of 363 branches.
But all of that time while you were working and building a really strong career, you were doing a lot of volunteer work. I mean, you were building thousands of hours almost in eventually. What was it that attracted you, and what was the area of volunteerism that attracted you first?
So what's funny about that, when I worked at Washington Mutual, I was fresh out of college, and I had a manager that said, it's important to give back to your communities. And so I was very fortunate. I had many excellent managers through my career. And so at the time, I was like, okay. And the first thing I did was I became a mentor. And I was a mentor to a young girl who'd lost her mom to cancer. Dad was a little overwhelmed. It was in Moscow, Idaho. And so that was where I got my toe a little wet. And then when we located to Yakima, I started participating at Chamber of Commerce had business subcommittees where we would go out and recruit different agencies to teach skill sets for free to Chamber members. So it might be identity theft prevention, because back then it was a big deal in the early 2000s. And then, of course, just working with my kids in school, I'd find opportunities to volunteer at their schools. But in any way, shape, or form I could give back, I would. For me, the identity theft prevention, the Shreds and Meds events, the drug take-back events, I've been on Crime Stoppers now going on 26 years. I like to tell people I started when I was 5. Been the treasurer there, and just seeing the impacts in the community. You know, I want to be with organizations that I see are making a difference. And if they're not, to be able to make recommendations on maybe how they could make a difference.
Can I ask though, and you may not want to reveal this, have your personal family, have they been impacted by any of the things that have attracted you to supporting that? I mean, particularly with drug addiction, particularly with Safe Yakima, etc. Is that really where part of the inspiration came from?
So yes, I have siblings that have struggled with substance use disorder, and both my sons, I have a 28-year-old son and one that'll be 27 in February, they both lost friends to the fentanyl epidemic. And these weren't kids that necessarily were heavy into drugs. These were kids that went to a rave and they thought they were taking like Oxycontin or Adderall, and it was actually one of the fentanyls that you see online where 7 out of 10 are laced with, or I should say contaminated with a lethal dose of fentanyl. These aren't drug dealers that are intentionally contaminating these substances and selling them online. It's just that when you look at where these illicit substances are cut, it's oftentimes in a jungle and it's not an FDA approved environment. So they're cleaning one drug and now they're cutting another drug and another, and so the contamination takes place. And so those online pills used to be 3 out of 10, now it's up to 7 out of 10 of these online pills that are counterfeited. They look identical to the real product, are actually contaminated with a lethal dose of fentanyl.
So it's a relief to know that it hasn't touched you in any kind of tragedy, but obviously for your son's friends who've died and the families of their friends who've lost lives. Is that really then what inspired you to get involved with Safe Yakima? Was it an organization that you almost founded? And that I'm not sure about. No, it already existed. Mm-mm. Okay. But you've become very, very much the spearhead and the leader of that, and the impact that it's having on this community is so very, very powerful. Where did you start?
Thank you for that. Well, it's funny because I said to my husband at the time, our sons had graduated from Washington State University. They were both launching their careers. Our oldest is a mechanical engineer at Triumph. He's actually in their quality engineering team and rocking it, killing it. And our youngest is an agricultural technology salesperson in Texas. He actually manages the entire Western United States for a company called Topcon. And they're both just doing tremendously well. And I said to him, the word I kept saying is I felt grateful that our boys weren't a statistic. Mm-hmm. And I felt the need, I felt this calling to pay it forward. So I reached out to Vicki Baker, who was a friend of mine. She served on the Crime Stoppers board. And I said, hey, my husband thinks I've absolutely lost my mind, but I'd like to leave banking. I feel that that has run its course, and I just want to pivot, and I want to really focus my last part of my career on giving back fully to this community and to our youth. And I said, so if you hear anything come up, let me know. And 2 weeks later, the executive director role opened up. So it was like a God thing. It was meant to be. Interviewed with the board, and yes, Safe Yakima has been around since 2006. It came about when there was a methamphetamine crisis, and so a lot of identity theft, and some community members came together and said, we need to do something, make a difference, and so that's kind of how they pulled the organization together. We got our first drug-free communities grant in 2010. Our first mentoring grant came in 2017. But we had rapid turnover, which isn't uncommon at the nonprofit. Our executive directors would last maybe a year and a half. And so when I took over the organization, it was really kind of circling the drain. It was not doing well. And so when the board kind of shared where it was at and their vision and what they thought might be the future for Safe Yakima, I said, well, I'm a go big or go home kind of girl. So if that isn't your image, then I'm not your girl. And they were like, okay, sounds good.
Sounds good,
and
yes.
So the rest they say is history. And so we went from being in one school, we're now in 26 schools. We went from a little over $300,000 in funding with 3 grants to 12 grants with a little bit around 1.3 million in funding. And this is in very short order. And we do it with a very small but powerful staff. I have a tremendous staff, an amazing board. I couldn't do it without them.
But this week you've had some bad news in terms of that funding. I mean, it's going to have a huge impact to you. I mean, you can share with us, if you like, the details, but you're going to be forced to lose staff. You're losing federal funding. What impact is this going to have on organisations, actually not just yours, but all of the organisations that have suddenly had their funding cut?
Correct. Yes. So a little after 7 last night Pacific time, so it would have been a little after 10 o'clock Eastern time, we received notification that our PFS grant, which is $375,000 a year, and our STOP grant, which is $50,000 a year, were terminated. And it wasn't just ours, it was across the country. Mm-hmm. So the current administration, taking viewers back, a year ago they released the White House skinny budget, and prevention was a big portion that they were going to cut. And so Safe Yakima, a lot of other small organizations, prevention organizations across the United States, CADCA rallied all of us. We all sent in templates, letters to our legislators and said, this can't happen, this is going to be the impacts of it. And we convinced senators and congressional members to overwhelmingly pass a continuing resolution. So that means they'd sustain the funding levels of the prior year. And so that passed the House, it passed the Senate. Well, unbeknownst to us last night, in one big swoop, all of that funding was removed, and it is impacting us. It's impacting programs like Washington State University has some programs. Any PTTCs, so these are kind of technical assistance providers in prevention and treatment works. The Yakima Tribal Nation Behavioral Health Services have been impacted. And so it's SAMHSA specifically, and it's their CSAP and CSAT programs that were eliminated. So of course right now we're trying to engage again our legislators to say, is this even something that can happen? The impacts will be tremendous. As I shared with you during our fentanyl series, Safe Yakima Valley spearheaded and led our ODMAP project, which allowed us for the first time to really view the totality of the opioid epidemic. Prior to ODMAP, we could only get the numbers for overdose fatalities. And when I started at Safe Yakima, that was one of my first questions I asked our local coroner, our local hospitals, and I even went to Washington State Department of Health and said, okay, I see the number of deaths, but we need to know how many people survive this to really get a true picture of the magnitude of this problem. Nobody had those figures. It wasn't tracked. And if it was, it wasn't being disseminated and shared. Nobody could find it very quickly. So then we started the process of linking our law enforcement and first responders to ODMAP. So when they respond to an overdose on site and they enter it into their dashboard, it simultaneously will update ODMAP in near real time. So you get little pins on a map, just like you would from a hotel, like when you're on search looking for a hotel in the vicinity, there's little pins. And if there's 5 or more overdoses in a 24-hour period within a section, we get a spike alert response saying, hey, there's potentially a bad batch, a contaminated batch, a high potency batch that's circulating. So then we can respond in kind, and that's exactly what we did. We took the data and we created a strategic plan working with a bunch of different partners. We worked across the continuum of care. And basically when we identified 2 hotspots in Yakima, we gathered Yakima Police Department, Triumph Treatment Center, Comprehensive Mental Health, Yakima Neighborhood Health Services, Yakima County Health and Human Services. They are literally doing ride-alongs multiple times a week, going to these hotspots and getting these people into services they need. Walk-in clinic at Comprehensive for medication for opioid use disorder, getting them into housing. They've had tremendous success. Part of my staffing is coordinating those efforts. I pay staff to help coordinate that. That coordination would go away. We also run something called positive social norms in 7 of our schools. In positive social norms, the only thing we can do with federal dollars is evidence-based programs. Mm-hmm. So this is evidence-based. And basically what it does is it corrects misperceptions about youth substance use. So if you ask adults, if you ask youth, if you ask teachers, what percentage of 8th graders do you believe vaped in the last 30 days, boys and girls? They overwhelmingly will come back and say 60, 70, 80%. And the truth is it's less than 10%. Wow. It's repeat offenders. But with positive social norms, we don't say only 10% of X middle school students vaped in the last 30 days. We flip the narrative and we say the overwhelming majority, 90% of X students did not use substances in the last 30 days, didn't vape, didn't use marijuana. Because science has shown that when you get into middle school, you are influenced heavily by your peers. Not in elementary school, you're still looking at mom and dad and the adults in awe. Middle school, they're kind of like, you're not cool anymore. I'm gonna see what my peers are doing and follow suit. So if you think the overwhelming majority of your peers are using substances and you're in the bathroom, somebody says, hey, you wanna hit a vape? You're more inclined to say yes. Mm-hmm. But if you know overwhelmingly your peers
don't do it,
frown upon it, they disapprove of it and they don't do it, you're more inclined to say no, and you're more inclined to say you shouldn't do that either. And so it moves the dial very quickly. Well, thankfully we have some opioid dollars that are gonna substitute and help fulfill that campaign, but we were also using PFS dollars to try and expand that into other schools.
So this is gonna have a huge impact on everything that you're doing.
Tremendous.
I mean, you mentioned it briefly, and I do want to touch on it, even though it's bragging rights. I was very proud of the series that we did that you contributed to enormously, focus on fentanyl. And we tried as part of that to look at it all in the round, because we also spoke to parents who have been devastated by the loss of children, specifically through fentanyl, but also through other drugs. Now, you mentioned methamphetamine was the problem 10 years ago. 20 years before that, I'm sure it was probably
heroin.
Cocaine or heroin, exactly. How do you ever keep up with what is changing? We may be able to get our hands around fentanyl at some point and get a grip on it, but isn't there then going to be
always
another
something
massive
new
problem?
And yes, I will compliment that series was outstanding. You guys did an outstanding job, really, truly. And I got several of our board members, several community members said the same thing. So bravo.
Your contribution was massive, so thank you.
Well, thank you. And you're correct. There's always a new substance. But here's the deal with prevention work. We're teaching youth resiliency skills, drug resistance skills. Prevention work, again, it has to be evidence-based. Why didn't DARE work? Well, because DARE just talked about the risks of substances. They didn't teach kids how to say no. They didn't teach them that. They didn't teach them resiliency skills. And resiliency can be taught. So I give the example. I was a child that had 4 adverse childhood experiences from the Kaiser study in 1997. Of course, evidence shows that the more adverse childhood experiences a youth experiences, the more likely they are to turn to substances. However, in our world, resiliency trumps ACEs, and it can be taught. So I have 4 adverse childhood experiences. I have a college degree, I have a successful career, I have a wonderful marriage, I have 2 children that are successful. So the cycle can be broken. Right. How? Because it can be taught through prevention work. We also expose them, there's risk factors. So I grew up in a broken home. I have a parent or sibling in jail. I grew up in a neglectful home. I grew up in poverty. Those are all risk factors. In prevention, we expose them to positive factors or protective factors. So for example, in our mentoring program, we expose them, we take them on college campuses. And we actually had a group of males at one of our middle schools that rode in the bus to Central Washington University. They were all Hispanic, and they said, college is dumb. I'm not going to college. And my parents said I can't afford it anyway. And so we take them on, and they're wonderful at Central. We unload them on the bus. We give them a gift card to go buy food in the food court. So they get to sit with the big kids on campus. They get a tour of the campus. They sit in the auditorium. They learn about campus life. And on the bus ride back, 100% of those same kids said, I'm so going to college. I'm going to Central. Right. And one boy, his name, I can still remember, I can still see his face, and he said, I didn't think anybody would want me.
Oh, how sad.
So simply by exposing them to what can be, because many of our youth haven't even been outside of their own neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. They have never been to a movie, they've never been to Capitol Theater, they've never played a board game, and so by exposing them to that, we're saying there's healthier alternatives to cope when you're feeling stressed or down than substances.
So what is the future? For not just for Safe Yakima, but for Alicia. It's Are you ever going to get to the point where you think maybe I now need to pass this mantle on? I don't know. Maybe that you feel this really will be your life's work. What do you think is next for you?
No, absolutely. My husband's a little bit older than me, and ironically, he was involved in a head-on collision April 1st from a person who was under the influence of fentanyl. Unfortunately, that person didn't survive, but my husband did. And so it really level-setted, like, wow, we have 8 years difference. I can't work forever and really enjoy retirement with my husband. And so 100%, one of my favorite things about being a manager and executive director is watching my employees grow. So nothing would make me happier than to grow an employee and take over and continue and expand the work that we've laid out for them.
And what does retirement look like for Alicia? I don't see you in retirement. I just can't picture it.
I will always be involved, right? I will still always have my toe in the water. Love Coeur d'Alene. We love to spend time in Coeur d'Alene. There's several places. My husband's never been to Europe. I have.
Oh, gosh.
He's never
needs
been.
To go.
Yes.
I'll give you some tips.
Absolutely. New Zealand, Australia is on our bucket list. Just to say we've done it. Ireland, we'd really love to do Ireland. And then the United States has so many beautiful places. And although we've been to many of them, there's a lot we haven't seen. And so we'd really love to do that. And my oldest says he doesn't want children, but my youngest does. So hopefully there'll be grandchildren in my future. And I can spoil the heck out of them and then hand them back to my son and say, karma.
That is something to look forward to, most definitely. Well, Alicia, we always finish with just some silly questions. So if you're prepared for these, we'll go with some either or. But what is your favorite music?
Favorite music? It depends on my mood. I like all music. I even love Christmas music. I'm kind of cheesy that way. I have it on the Christmas station all December. But I'd have to go to my go-to's 80s rock and roll. My big hair days when I had my spiral perm.
I've got pictures of me with one of those. Yeah. Okay, and your favorite movie?
Favorite movie? It's probably a tie between Breakfast Club, It's a Wonderful Life, and Harry Potter.
Now, I didn't watch It's a Wonderful Life this year. I think it's the first year in forever that I haven't, but it's one of my favorites.
Yes,
too.
absolutely.
Do you like the color or the black and white version?
Either or. I just love Jimmy Stewart's one of my favorite actors. The other one I love around the holidays is Sound of Music.
Oh, right, yes. Which has got nothing to do with Christmas.
I know.
But it's strange. But it is such a holiday staple. And The Wizard of Oz for some reason.
Yes.
It's very strange. But watching a funny movie or a dramatic movie?
Funny.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I married my husband. He's a funny guy. He makes me laugh.
Now, a car or a motorcycle?
Oh, definitely a car.
Have you done any bike riding?
I have. I've been on the back, and the only person I really feel safe with is my uncle, who's in his 70s and still rides. He's been riding since he was a teenager. And he even gets a little crazy, but it's like he's one and the same with that bike. But for the most part, I like having four walls around me. And now I don't want to be in a clunker. I want to be in a nice car, given the choice.
So that road trip across Europe is probably not happening on the back of a Harley.
Yes,
no,
exactly.
Okay, and finally, a messy desk or a clean desk?
Oh, OCD, clean.
Yeah. Funny enough, you were going to say that.
Yes. I'm very type A. I admit it. I acknowledge it. It's my strength and my area of opportunity.
Well, Alicia, how is the tea? I've been drinking away. I haven't given you a chance.
I took one sip, but it was delicious, and I can smell it.
It smells nice. It's local mint. And you say your ex-husband was part of the mint industry. Did he deliver tea? Was that part of it?
He delivered the mint oil that flavored toothpastes and pharmaceutical products and sticks of gum. Your after 8 dinner mints, and yes, tea.
After 8,
yes. Not the York peppermint. That's not
the after 8.
That's mentholatum. Yes, right. The after 8 is real mint.
I don't like those though. They're terribly sweet. If they took out the sugar content,
I love them.
I love them. You got a sweet tooth?
I could eat the whole pack.
I'm sure I've done that too. Well, Alicia, this is an absolute pleasure. There's a lot more I think we can talk about. With some of our guests, we already know when we sit down there needs to be a part 2. And I have a feeling we'll be having you back for maybe for a glass of wine next time.
Yes, absolutely. A little later in the day, you got it.
Or some more tea, we'll see.
Yes.
But Alicia, I also hope things work out with you. We'll probably talk to you later on for the news. about what's happening with the organisation this week. But for Wine Time, we really appreciate you coming along.
And
we want to say a
for
very
having
big
me.
thank you to you for joining us. Don't forget, Wine Time Yakima has a new episode every Saturday night at 7 p.m. We've got a lot of very exciting guests coming up. And we want to say a big thank you to Adam and all of his team at the Yakima Visitor Centre for hosting us again today. It's always a pleasure to be in this really wonderful facility. Alicia, great to see you.
Great to
Enjoy
see
the
you.
tea.
Happy New Year.
Cheers. Happy New Year.
Cheers.